You're a disgrace. You aren't welcome here. My daughter said it at her party. I smiled and passed the attorney a file. It's time, I whispered softly. Her smile vanished. You know those moments that shatter your world into a million pieces? For me, it wasn't a car crash or a terrible accident. It was a tiny plastic bag, pulled from my daughter-in-law's coat at the dry cleaners, holding a secret so dark it turned my blood to ice. My grandchildren were marked. Marked for what, you ask? Well, that's what I needed to find out before it was too late. It was just another sweltering afternoon, the kind where the heat clings to your skin long after the sun starts to dip. I was walking home from the market, my basket heavy with groceries, sweat soaking through my blouse. The old street was quiet, the peeling paint on the buildings telling stories of years gone by. Then I saw it, Arthur's Dry Cleaning, its faded wooden sign swaying in the breeze. I stopped, digging into my purse for the crumpled yellow claim ticket. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, had pressed it into my hand that morning, her voice soft but rushed. Mom, please, could you pick up my wool coat from Arthur's? I have meetings all day. I'd nodded, not thinking much of it. Just one more errand, like so many I always did for my children. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of fabric softener and steam. Arthur, an old man with glasses perched on his nose, was behind the counter, flipping through a ledger with his bony hands. I handed him the ticket. He glanced at it, nodded, and then, strangely, disappeared into the back room himself. Usually he'd send his young helper, but today he moved slowly, as if he was trying to buy time. I waited patiently, stroking the handle of my basket, my mind on what I'd cook for my grandchildren that night. He returned with Chloe's coat, carefully wrapped in clear plastic, smelling faintly of softener. But instead of handing it to me, he just stopped. He scanned the empty shop, his eyes darting around. I thought it was strange, but before I could ask, his rough, calloused hand gripped my arm tightly. Eleanor, he murmured, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. Come here for a moment. Without giving me time to react, he led me behind a worn-out curtain that shielded the back of the shop. The air grew heavy with the smell of bleach and steam. Piles of clothes, waiting to be ironed, rose like a messy wall. He turned to me, his voice trembling now. You need to see this. He opened a rickety drawer under the counter and pulled out a small, clear plastic bag. It was just big enough to make my heart stop. Inside, there was a bank transfer receipt, stamped in red, with a figure so astronomically large I had to look at it several times to be sure I wasn't mistaken. Millions. Who keeps something like that in a coat pocket? And next to the paper, a photograph. The innocent faces of Sophia and Leo, my grandchildren, with crooked, angry red circles drawn over them. They looked like they'd been sketched in a fit of rage, or worse, with dark intent. My blood turned to ice. My hands felt like stone. Arthur, what is this? I stammered, my voice breaking. He just shook his head, his eyes wide with fear, as if even he couldn't bear what he'd found. Eleanor, you have to get the children out of here immediately. Don't waste a second. You must be gone before sunrise. His voice was harsh, pleading. I wanted to ask him more, to demand an explanation, but he just pressed the bag into my hand, repeating, I can't keep this here. It's too terrifying. I took the coat, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I tucked the bag deep into my pocket, feeling like I was carrying a bomb about to explode. As I left, my steps were uncertain, as if I were walking on air, unable to feel the ground beneath my feet. My basket tipped, and a few tomatoes rolled out, almost falling onto the sidewalk. Outside, the world continued its usual noise, the squeal of a bus, the calls of street vendors, the laughter of children. But in my head, only Arthur's insistent voice echoed, repeating like a funeral bell, before sunrise. The sky darkened, dusk swallowing the thick night. I entered the house, my feet heavy as stone. That zip-top bag holding its terrifying secret still burned in my pocket like a curse. The large house, once filled with Sophia and Leo's laughter, was now frozen in an icy silence. Ben, my son, was on a business trip in Denver, hundreds of miles away. It was just me, my two small grandchildren, and the terrifying emptiness Chloe had left behind. My phone vibrated, a short message from my daughter-in-law. Mom, I have an unexpected meeting. I'll be very late. Please take care of the kids. I stared at the words on the screen, and a nameless anxiety rose in my chest. Was it true or just an excuse to hide something? I walked into the living room where Sophia and Leo were focused on building with blocks on the old rug. Sophia, 7 years old with big round eyes, proudly shouted, "Grandma, look! My house has a chimney." Her voice was clear as a bell. Leo, only 4, sat beside her, hugging his plastic dinosaur, humming a song without words. Seeing them, my heart clenched. Just a few hours earlier, I thought they were safe. Now, the image of those 2 red circles haunted me, an invisible threat lurking somewhere. I forced a smile, stroking Sophia's head. "It's beautiful, my love. Rest for a bit. Grandma will make dinner." But in my mind, everything was spinning. Arthur's voice wouldn't stop. "You have to leave before sunrise." I didn't know what I was running from, but my instincts as a mother and grandmother screamed that those 2 children couldn't stay here a minute longer. I walked silently to my bedroom, locked the door, and with a trembling hand dialed Grace, a nurse friend I trusted completely. We'd been through so much, from the lean years raising our children to the endless nights caring for my husband in the hospital. If there was anyone I could trust now, it was her. "Hello, Grace?" "It's me, Eleanor," I whispered, my voice cracked with worry. "I need your help. Do you know a reliable taxi? One that can make a long trip tonight?" Grace was silent for a moment, perhaps sensing the strangeness in my voice. "Eleanor, what's wrong? Why the rush?" I took a deep breath, holding back tears. "I can't explain right now. I just need a cab as soon as possible." Grace didn't press. "I'll call my brother. He's a driver, very discreet. Give me 10 minutes. I nodded, even though I knew she couldn't see me, and hung up with my heart in a knot. I rushed to the kitchen, my hands moving quickly. Bread, cheese, the children's favorite cookies, a couple of water bottles. I threw it all into a small bag, wondering what else I should bring. I didn't know where I was going, only that my grandchildren couldn't go hungry or be helpless. From the kitchen, I looked towards the living room. Sophia was showing Leo how to build a bridge. Their laughter was like knives in my chest. So innocent, so carefree, with no idea of the storm about to break over our family. I wondered if I was wrong, if it was all a misunderstanding, if I was overreacting. But then the photo, with those 2 red circles, reappeared in my mind, and I knew I had no other choice. I ran to the children's room, opened the closet, grabbed a few items of clothing, Sophia's blue sweater, Leo's superhero pajamas, socks. I packed Sophia's yarn doll, which she always hugged to sleep, and Leo's toy car. I threw everything into a large suitcase, a messy scramble, but there was no time to organize. The streetlight flickered through the window, making my heart pound. I drew the curtains, afraid a curious neighbor might notice my strange haste. This town is small. Everyone knows everyone. I didn't want anyone asking questions. The phone vibrated again. A text from Grace. "Taxi is here? On the corner. My brother's name is Mike. You can trust him." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I went out to the living room, knelt beside Sophia, and gently shook her shoulder. "Let's go, my love," I whispered in the sweetest voice I could manage. "Put on your coat. We're going for a night ride." Sophia looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "A night ride? Where to, Grandma?" I smiled, though inside I was a wreck. "To a very fun place. But we have to leave now or it will be too late." Leo rubbed his eyes, starting to complain. "I'm sleepy, Grandma," he mumbled drowsily. I pulled a piece of candy from my pocket and put it in his hand. "Here, be a good boy. Come with me. You can sleep later." Leo grinned from ear to ear, immediately forgetting about being tired. I picked him up, took Sophia by the hand, and hurried toward the taxi waiting on the corner. The hallway to the door seemed endless, my sandals dragging against the cold floor, rushed and trembling. I put the children in the back seat and carefully buckled their seatbelts. Sophia hugged her doll, looking at me with curiosity, but still trusting. Leo let out a long yawn, resting his head on his sister's shoulder. I sat next to them, clutching the suitcase to my chest, my heart heavy. The driver, a middle-aged man with a tired face, watched me in the rearview mirror. "Where are you headed at this hour, ma'am?" he asked, his tone concerned. I swallowed hard, my voice breaking. "To the bus station, please. As fast as you can." The car started, breaking the stillness of the night. Through the window, I watched the house recede, sinking into the darkness like a tomb, holding secrets and betrayals. The bus station at midnight was as bustling as a market that never sleeps. Neon signs, green and red, flickered over old posters, making my head spin. The calls of street vendors, the horns of buses, the screech of suitcases rolling on the concrete mixed into a chaotic concert. And yet that disorder made me feel safer, as if my grandchildren and I could get lost in the crowd and escape the invisible gaze that was watching us. I held Sophia's hand tightly. Leo was sleeping soundly on my shoulder, his warm breath on my neck reminding me that I had to stay strong, even if I felt broken inside. I approached the ticket counter, trying to sound calm as I asked, 3 tickets to Charleston, the last trip of the day. The ticket agent, a man with a messy mustache, glanced at me and the children, then slid 3 tickets through the window. It's leaving immediately. Get on quick or you'll miss it, he said in a monotone voice. I nodded, paid, and turned to Sophia, forcing a smile. We're going to visit a distant relative. We're going to have a great time. The girl nodded, though her big eyes reflected curiosity. Which relative, Grandma? Do I know them? I stroked her head, avoiding her gaze. It's an old family member. You haven't met them yet. Get some sleep. It's a long ride. Sophia nodded again, hugging her yarn doll tightly, her eyes fixed on the bus window. The bus pulled away, the roar of the engine breaking the night silence. Leo remained asleep on my shoulder, his head lolling, his hand still clutching his toy car. I looked outside, the streetlights blurring past like fading memories. Charleston, the place where I had lived more than 20 years ago, was the only option in my head at that moment. It was there that my husband and I built the first years of our marriage, where Ben was born, and where I once felt safe. Now I just hoped that city would be a refuge for the 3 of us, even if only temporarily. But deep down, I knew I wasn't just running away. I was searching for a way to face a truth I didn't yet dare to name. When we arrived in Charleston, it was already dawn, pale light filtering through old rooftops. I carried Leo and led Sophia to a small motel hidden behind the central square. The room was cramped with a faint smell of dampness and a double bed covered in faded sheets. I put both children on the bed and tucked them in. Sophia murmured in her sleep, "Grandma, where's Mommy?" That question pierced my heart like a dagger. I just stroked her head and whispered, "Sleep, sweetie. Your mommy is busy. She'll be here in a little while." But I knew very well it was a lie. Chloe, the daughter-in-law I once loved so much, was now an enigma, a dark shadow I didn't dare to face. I sat by the window, my hands clasped, my mind racing. The plastic bag was still in my coat pocket, heavy as a curse. The transfer receipt, the photo with 2 red circles, and Arthur's warning were pieces of a puzzle I didn't know how to begin to solve. I thought of Ben, my son, so far away. I wanted to call him, to tell him everything, but every time I picked up the phone, I stopped. If I was wrong, if it was all a misunderstanding, I would destroy his family. But if I was right, if Chloe was really involved in something terrible, how could I tell my son that the woman he loves, the mother of his children, could be betraying all of us? In the midst of my confusion, an idea sparked. I had to go to the church. Father Michael, the elderly priest in Charleston, was the only one I could trust right now. He had been with me when my husband died. He held my hand through the darkest days. If anyone could help me find my way, it was him. I decided that morning I would take the children to Mass, to pray for peace and to find a way out. The next day, I woke Sophia and Leo. I helped them get dressed. "Come to church with me and I'll buy you ice cream afterward," I said, faking cheerfulness in my voice. Leo got excited. "Chocolate, Grandma!" I smiled and nodded, though inside I was filled with worry. We walked to St. Francis Church, where the ancient stone walls and the ringing of the bells gave a rare sense of calm. Sophia held my hand while Leo ran ahead with his toy car dangling from his fingers. Looking at them, all I prayed for was to preserve that innocence forever. Father Michael recognized me as soon as I entered the church. His white hair shone under the light streaming through the stained glass windows, and his kind but piercing eyes looked straight at me. "It's been too long," he said in a warm voice. "What are you and your grandchildren doing here? Is something wrong?" I just nodded, unable to speak in front of the children. After Mass, I let Sophia and Leo play in the church's backyard where other children were running around. I asked Father Michael for a private conversation. In a small, quiet room behind the altar, the smell of old wood and melted wax helped me breathe easier. Gathering my courage, I told him everything. Chloe's coat, the transfer receipt with a huge sum, and the photo of Sophia and Leo with those terrifying red circles. I handed him the plastic bag, my hand shaking. Father Michael was silent for a long time, his hands clasped together, his face growing harder by the second. Finally, he sighed and said in a grave voice, "Eleanor, this is beyond what a priest can handle. This isn't just a family matter. This is a much greater danger. You need someone who understands the law. He paused, looking at me with deep concern. I know someone who can help. Victoria, a very good lawyer and a parishioner here. She'll know what to do. I nodded, feeling a ray of hope light up in the darkness. That same afternoon, in the small confessional, I met Victoria for the first time. She was young, maybe a little over 30, with short hair and eyes so sharp they seemed to see everything. Wearing latex gloves, she carefully opened the bag and examined the receipt under the dim yellow light. This transaction code belongs to a ghost company registered through an offshore account, she said, her fingers typing quickly on her laptop, her face serious with concentration. A non-existent company. She paused and pointed to the last line of the document. Signed by Julian Cortez. That name meant nothing to me. But when Victoria looked at Father Michael, they exchanged a meaningful glance. That man has been involved in financial fraud and money laundering, Victoria said in a low voice. This is not simple, Eleanor. I felt my hands resting on the wooden table begin to tremble. But why my grandchildren? I asked, my voice breaking. Why are their faces marked in red? Victoria didn't answer right away. She just looked at me with compassion. We need to investigate more, she said finally. But the first thing is for you and the children to stay here, where you'll be safe. I will contact some trusted colleagues to look into this. Father Michael placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice soft but firm. God will protect you and your grandchildren, but you must be strong for them. I hugged Sophia and Leo as we left the church. As the gray afternoon covered the cobblestone streets, the bells rang behind us, reminding me that I was no longer alone. The next day, I found myself in front of a motel door in Charleston, my heart on fire. Sophia and Leo were playing in the yard of Grace, my old nurse friend whom I trusted completely. Through the wooden fence, I watched them. Sophia was teaching Leo how to blow soap bubbles, and their crystal-clear laughter filled the sunny morning. I smiled, but that smile felt heavy, as if every second spent there was stolen from them. Grace, can you watch the kids for a day? I asked, trying to stay calm. I have to go back to my town to sort out some important personal matters. Grace looked at me. Her sharp eyes seemed to want to ask more, but she just nodded. Don't worry, Eleanor. The children will be fine with me. I'll make them pudding and tell them stories. I squeezed her hand, saying nothing more, but with infinite gratitude in my heart. I took the first bus of the morning back to town, huddled in a seat at the back, the plastic bag still in my coat pocket, a constant reminder of the terrifying secret I was carrying. The landscape passed by the window, dry cornfields, dilapidated houses, but I saw nothing but the image of those two red circles on Sophia and Leo's photo. I wondered what I was doing, if it was right to leave the children behind and return to this dangerous place. But I knew that if I wanted to protect them, I had to uncover the truth, no matter how cruel. The family house appeared as the bus pulled into the last stop. It was silent, cold. It was no longer the home Ben and I had built over so many years. Now it felt like a crime scene waiting for me to discover it. I took the spare key from the bottom of my purse, my hand trembling as I opened the gate. The squeak of the hinges echoed in the silence, making me turn my head with a start. The street was deserted, only a few dogs barking in the distance. I went inside and locked the door, feeling like I was crossing into another world where everything I had believed could crumble. The living room was just as I had left it the day before. Chloe's light blanket was thrown carelessly over the sofa, as if she had been there just hours ago. On the side, a half-drunk cup of coffee, the dried foam now a brown stain. I stood there, looking around, trying to find some sign, some clue to explain what was happening. But the air inside the house was heavy, as if even the walls were keeping secrets. I didn't hesitate any longer and went straight to Ben and Chloe's room, where I knew there was something I needed to check. Under the closet, the small gray safe was still there, motionless like a silent accomplice. I remembered Ben's birthday a few months ago when Chloe, drunk after several shots of tequila, had blurted out the combination while laughing with me. Mom, you wouldn't believe it. Ben always tells me to change the code, but I like May 12th, 2018, our wedding day. At the time, I just laughed, thinking it was an unimportant detail. But now that sequence was the key to opening the door to the truth. I knelt, dragging the dust-covered safe out. My hands shook as I turned each number, 120518. The dry click echoed like a gunshot in the silence, making my heart leap. I opened the heavy door of the safe, breathing heavily. Inside, stacks of dollar bills were neatly piled, their green glow leaving me stunned. Tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. A sum my family had never dreamed of. Next to them, a pile of fake passports and IDs with unfamiliar names: Maria Gonzalez, Juan Alvarez, Sofia Morales. I flipped through them one by one, my heart pounding as if I were reading a list of ghosts. In a corner were 2 sealed cell phones ready to be activated. But what took my breath away were the papers at the bottom. 3 business-class plane tickets from Chicago to Madrid in the names of Chloe, Sophia, and Leo. Ben's name was not there. I checked them over and over, hoping I was mistaken, but the cold truth was like a knife piercing my chest. Chloe was planning to escape, to take my grandchildren and leave my son behind like an obstacle. I pulled out one more envelope, my hands trembling. Inside, a photo. Chloe smiling radiantly next to an unknown man, elegant in a black suit. On the back, a handwritten scrawl: My Cortez. That name, Julian Cortez, matched the signature on the transfer receipt. The whole room began to spin. The air grew thick, and I struggled to breathe. I sat on the floor, my back against the dresser, the photo falling from my hands. Chloe, the daughter-in-law I had loved like a daughter. The one who cooked with me for family meals. The one who hugged me, crying when Ben had trouble at work. That woman was betraying us. Not only was she betraying Ben, but she was also planning to take my 2 grandchildren as if they were part of a deal. I thought of Sophia, with her innocent smile as she drew pictures for me, and of Leo, with his habit of hugging my legs whenever I baked. How could she be so cruel? How could she circle their little faces with a red marker as if they were merchandise? At that moment, the familiar rumble of my neighbor, Mr. Henderson's truck, came down the street. I jumped. Hurriedly, I put everything back in the safe, trying to leave it as it was. My hands were shaking so much that I dropped a passport, but I managed to pick it up. I pushed the safe back into place and closed it. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like a guilty person's. I stood up, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and tried to calm down. As I headed for the door, I spotted a torn envelope in the kitchen trash can, with the logo of a foreign bank shining in the light. Instinctively, I took it. I put it in my jacket pocket without a second thought. When the door slammed shut behind me, I walked out onto the street as if floating. I knew I wasn't just running away. In my pocket, I carried the proof of a terrible plan. Chloe planned to escape with Cortez, taking a fortune, abandoning Ben, and worst of all, taking my 2 grandchildren with them as part of the deal. I returned to the motel in Charleston, my legs heavy as lead, my pocket still holding the horrible evidence from the house. It was now midday. Dim sunlight filtered through the slits of the thin curtains, falling on the old wooden floor. Sophia and Leo had just woken up from their nap. They were on the bed, rubbing their eyes. Sophia, her hair tangled, looked up at me, her big, innocent eyes wide. "Grandma, when are we going home to Mommy?" Her question was like a knife in my chest. I knelt, stroked her hair, and tried to smile, though I knew the smile was forced. "Soon, my love. Your mom is busy with something. Stay with me for a few more days, okay?" But my throat was closing up. I couldn't say more. Leo, hugging his plastic dinosaur, interrupted, "Grandma, I want cookies." I nodded. I took a package from my bag and gave it to him, just to hide the fact that my hands were still trembling. I took both of them to the motel's small courtyard where there was an old swing set. "Play for a while. I'll watch you from here," I told them, trying to sound calm. But inside, I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff. What I had found in the safe, the stacks of money, fake passports, plane tickets, and the photo of Chloe with Cortez, would not stop tormenting me. I knew I couldn't stay here forever, nor could I keep running without facing the truth. But how could I protect my grandchildren if their own mother, whom I once trusted, was part of this nightmare? Later that afternoon, Victoria arrived. Her steps were quick, but her eyes reflected concern. She was accompanied by 2 men in plain clothes, though their bearing made their cold professionalism clear. They introduced themselves as federal agents, showing credentials with official seals. "Ma'am, I'm Agent Miller," one of them said in a grave, firm voice. "This is my partner, Agent Davis. We need to see everything you found." I nodded and led them to the cramped rental room where a small wooden table had become the center of the entire truth. I spread everything out on the table. The receipt for a massive transfer, the envelope from the bank, a photo of Chloe smiling next to Cortez, 3 plane tickets to Madrid, and a stack of fake passports. Each object was like a new stab, reminding me of Chloe's betrayal. Agent Davis took a still-sealed cell phone and connected it via a USB cable to a small device. His laptop screen lit up, showing lines of code running at high speed. "We can recover the deleted data," he said without looking up. These things usually hold more information than people think. I remained seated, my hands clasped, my heart pounding hard. Outside, Sophia and Leo were playing in the courtyard, their laughter reaching me, but I didn't dare to look. I felt that if I lost control for even a second, I would let out the pain that was suffocating me. After a few tense minutes, Davis turned the screen towards me. There was a photo folder, and the first image was again of Sophia and Leo. Their innocent faces were circled in red marker, distorted with a cruel intention. I held my breath as if the air in the room had vanished. Agent Miller pointed at the screen, his voice lowered as if trying to prevent me from breaking down. "Ma'am, this isn't a personal mark. It's a symbol used in human trafficking networks." The word trafficking sounded like a thunderclap, leaving me paralyzed. He enlarged the image and showed a series of tiny numbers in the corner. "It's a transaction code. The red circle means target selected. The children are part of a much larger plan." Instinctively, I wanted to hug my grandchildren even though they were outside, as if I could protect them from that terrifying truth. My eyes filled with tears, but I refused to cry. I didn't want the little ones to see me. "You mean they plan to sell my grandchildren?" I asked in a trembling voice, barely audible. Miller nodded with a look full of compassion. "We don't know the whole plan yet, but this evidence points to an organized criminal network. And the woman in this photo," he asked, pointing to Chloe, "most likely an accomplice." Victoria placed her hand on my shoulder and her voice trembled too. "Eleanor, this is no longer a family matter. It's an extremely serious criminal case. We're going to do everything we can to protect the children." But her words couldn't calm the storm inside me. Chloe, the daughter-in-law I had loved like a daughter, who was with me when Leo was born, who shared laughter on so many family nights. How could she be so cruel? How could she turn two children, her own blood, into targets for a dirty business? Davis continued typing on the laptop, pulling up messages that had been deleted. One appeared, short but cold, 2 targets selected. In short, timely delivery. The message was sent from Chloe's number to an unknown number. Signed, JC Julian Cortez. I felt the blood in my body freeze. She really did this, I murmured, not knowing who I was talking to. Victoria took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Eleanor, I know this hurts so much, but you have to be strong for the children. They told me to stay calm, to act as if nothing was wrong." "Do not communicate with Chloe," Miller said in a firm voice. "She must not know what you've discovered." "We need time to investigate further," I nodded. But my heart was in a tangled mess. How could I pretend to be normal when every breath carried the pain of betrayal? How could I look into Sophia's and Leo's eyes knowing their mother had planned to sell them as if they were merchandise? I brought the 2 grandchildren back to the room, trying to play with them as usual. "Grandma, tell the story about the vampire," insisted Leo, climbing onto my lap. I hugged the boy and told him the story he loved. But my voice broke as if I myself were lost in a nightmare. Sophia was on the side, drawing with colored pencils, humming a song. I looked at them, and my chest ached as if it were being torn apart. They were carefree, innocent, not knowing their world had been on the verge of being shattered by the very mother they loved. Outside, black clouds gathered and a sudden downpour began. The rain beat hard on the motel's tin roof, marking the rhythm of the chaos in my chest. I drew the curtains, hugged the children, trying to protect them from the storm outside and the storm within me. The next morning, a black car pulled up in front of the motel. No license plate, no lights. But I knew it was a federal police vehicle. Victoria had called earlier to tell me to get ready. "Eleanor, today we're going to plan everything," she said over the phone, her voice confident, though with a hint of concern. I quickly put on a sweater. I woke the 2 grandchildren and asked them to stay with Grace for one more day. "Where are you going, Grandma?" Sophia asked with those big, curious eyes. I stroked her head, trying to force a smile. "I'm going to see an old friend. I'll be back for you in the afternoon." Leo, nibbling on a cookie, nodded without asking further. I kissed them on the forehead and got into the car, my heart as heavy as if I were carrying the whole world on my shoulders. The federal police office in Charleston was hidden on a narrow street with no sign to indicate that serious cases were handled there. I went in and was taken to a small meeting room where the smell of old coffee and papers hung in the air. Victoria was already waiting, seated at a long table. Across from her were 3 officers, Miller, Davis, and a female officer named Hayes, whose gaze was both stern and gentle. "Eleanor, we've reviewed the evidence you gave us," Miller began in a grave but sharp voice. "This is a major case related to an international crime ring. We need your cooperation to capture Chloe and Cortez. They explained the plan to create a fake scene where Sophia and Leo had disappeared to make Chloe and Cortez panic and reveal their movements. We will monitor all their communications, Hayes said, pointing to a screen showing a map of the city. We've installed a listening device on Chloe's phone and are tracking Cortez's number. They will contact each other and then we will have enough evidence. I listened, but my heart tightened. And my grandchildren? I asked, my voice trembling, unable to hide my fear. Hayes put a hand on my shoulder with a firm look. Don't worry, we have arranged an absolutely safe shelter for the children. You will be able to video call them whenever you want to see them. And they took me to another room where a social worker was playing with Sophia and Leo in a room full of toys. Sophia was coloring a picture and Leo was building with Legos while babbling a story about a spaceship. Seeing them, I felt like crying. They didn't know I was trying to protect them from their own mother. Eleanor? The social worker said in a soft voice. The children will stay here with me. I will take care of them as if they were my own. I nodded, hugged my 2 grandchildren tightly one more time before leaving, feeling like I was leaving a part of my heart behind. That night, I returned to the motel and sat alone in the small room, phone in hand, waiting. Victoria and Davis were with me. The listening device was on the table, and the laptop screen glowed with the messages being monitored. Just as we expected, my phone vibrated. A message from Chloe in a desperate tone. Mom, where are you? Have you seen the kids? They're gone. I've called the police. I'm scared to death. I read the message and felt my heart clench. How could she fake it like that? How could she write those words when she herself had planned to take my grandchildren away? Davis motioned for me not to answer, just gently shaking his head. Let her get tangled up on her own, he murmured. Half an hour later, Chloe's phone called an unknown number. The listening device activated and her voice came through the speaker, nervous and trembling. Cortez, the children are gone. I had everything ready, but I can't find them anywhere. The man's voice on the other end was hoarse and annoyed. Calm down. We can't back out now. The plane tickets are already bought. The buyer on the other end is waiting. If we don't have the merchandise, we'll be in big trouble. The word merchandise was like a knife twisting in my skin. I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palm, trying to hold back tears. Sophia and Leo, my 2 little angels, being called merchandise. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go confront Chloe, but Davis motioned for me to be quiet, his gaze cold. The call ended, but Chloe continued sending messages to Cortez. If we don't find the children, the whole plan will fall apart. You have to do something. Davis gave a cold smile. Let it fall apart. That's how it should be, he said in a grave voice. This confession will be irrefutable evidence at trial. Victoria took my hand and squeezed it gently, as if trying to give me strength. Eleanor, we're almost done with this, she said. But her voice also broke as if she herself felt my pain. I stayed there, my cold hands clasped, feeling both a deep fear and a strange relief. Relief because I knew Chloe and Cortez were digging their own graves, but the pain still crushed my chest. I thought of the past days when Chloe was a shy young woman, newly arrived in the family, when she would sit with me in the kitchen, kneading bread and telling me her dream of opening a small shop. I loved her. I thought she was part of the family. But now every memory was like a wound that opened wider each time I recalled it. Outside the window, the night was thick without a single star. I heard the soft murmur of several unlit car engines parked silently on the street corner. They were like beasts waiting, patiently biding their time. I looked at Victoria, then at Davis, and felt like I was entering a chess game whose end I did not know. Eleanor, you did the right thing, Victoria said, her voice low but firm. You saved your grandchildren, I nodded. But inside, a doubt began to grow. Had I really saved them? Or was I just dragging them into a new nightmare? That night, darkness covered Charleston like a thick veil. I was sitting inside a federal police command vehicle, parked 2 blocks from a cheap hotel on the outskirts of town. The air inside the car was heavy, the smell of engine oil and cold coffee mixing, making it even harder for me to breathe. Victoria was beside me, her gaze as hard as steel, but her hands were clasped tightly as if trying to contain her tension. Officer Hayes, who had reassured me that morning, was adjusting the radio, her voice deep but clear. Eleanor, you just stay here and listen. We'll handle everything. But how could I be calm when my heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest? Sophia and Leo were safe in the police station's playroom. but the mere thought that I was about to witness Chloe's betrayal made me tremble. Over the radio, short, sharp commands were heard like knives. Alpha Team, position on the northeast corner. Bravo Team, control the rear exit. The target is heading to the meeting point. I clenched my hands tightly, my nails digging into my palms, trying not to show my fear. Victoria placed a hand on my shoulder and murmured, "Eleanor, it will all be over tonight. You did the right thing by getting the children out." I nodded, but tears were already streaming silently down my cheeks. The right thing? What had I done besides run away and ask for help? Yet deep in my heart, I knew I had no other choice. I had to protect my grandchildren, even if the price was facing the heart-wrenching truth about my daughter-in-law, whom I had once loved like a daughter. Hayes turned on the live feed from the listening device, and Chloe's voice echoed, shaky and fast. "Cortez, I don't understand. Where are those two? Without them, what are we going to deliver in the deal?" Every word cut me like a knife. Deal. That word made me want to scream, to lunge out and slap her. How could she refer to Sophia and Leo, her own children, as if they were merchandise? Cortez's hoarse, rough voice replied, "Shut up. First, let's go to the hotel. The intermediary is already waiting there. If we don't bring the merchandise, we're finished." I held my breath as if the air inside the car had vanished. Intermediary? Merchandise? Those words were needles in my chest, reminding me that this wasn't just a family betrayal, but a monstrous crime. Hayes whispered into the radio, "The target has entered the parking lot. Prepare to move in." Through the microphone, I heard the dull thud of a car door closing, then rapid footsteps on the concrete. I imagined Chloe and Cortez, two tense figures moving towards the empty parking lot, unaware they were walking straight into the trap set by the police. Suddenly, a firm shout tore through the quiet. "Federal police, hands up!" The thunder of running boots, the click of flashlights turning on, and then a sharp scream from Chloe, so piercing it ripped through the night. "No, it can't be," she cried, her voice filled with terror. Over the radio, I heard sounds of a struggle. "Cortez, run!" Chloe yelled, but immediately an officer ordered, "Freeze! Put your hands up or I'll shoot!" There was a thud, then the sound of Cortez's body hitting the ground next to a white van. "Don't move," another voice commanded. I heard the metallic click of handcuffs being fastened. Chloe was crying, her voice in pieces. "You're mistaken. I didn't do anything." But then I heard her purse fall to the ground, stacks of money spilling out, and the cold voice of an officer. "Do you have anything else to say?" Sitting in the car, I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed silently down my cheeks. I didn't know if I was crying with relief because the trap had worked, or with the pain of facing the truth that Chloe, whom I had considered a daughter, was willing to sell my two grandchildren. Victoria took my hand, squeezing it tight. "Eleanor, they've got them. The children are safe," she said, her voice trembling. But the pain inside me did not subside. I thought of those nights when Chloe would sit with me, laughing, sharing small dreams. I believed her. I loved her. I thought she was part of the family. Now all that was left was a ghost, someone who had wanted to destroy everything. A voice came over the radio, brief but authoritative. "Both targets secured. Operation successful. No casualties." Outside, the sirens all went on at once. The red and blue lights spun, reflecting off the old hotel walls. I heard patrol car engines starting, voices giving orders, hurried footsteps. The night seemed torn apart by chaos. But for me, it was the sign that the net of fate had finally closed. A few weeks later, I sat in the courtroom of the federal courthouse in Charleston. The air was heavy, thick, as if the walls held secrets. The benches were filled with neighbors, mixed with a few reporters armed with cameras and notebooks, their gazes sharp, ready to record every moment. I held Sophia and Leo tightly. The children snuggled against me as if they could feel the tension in the air. Victoria was beside me, rubbing my back, whispering, "Eleanor, it will all be over today. You have been very brave." But how could I feel strong when my heart was in pieces? The truth about Chloe, about her terrible plan, was about to come to light, and I knew it would leave scars impossible to erase on me and my grandchildren. Chloe appeared in the defendant's box wearing a beige prison jumpsuit. Her hair tangled with no trace of the radiant daughter-in-law I had known. Her face was gaunt, aged 10 years, her eyes sunken, as if her guilt also haunted her. Beside her, Cortez trembled, his hands cuffed, his head down, unable to look at anyone. Seeing her, I didn't know what to feel, rage, pain, or just a cold emptiness in my chest. I had loved Chloe. I had believed she was part of the family. I even defended her in her fights with Ben. But now she was just a stranger, a woman who had tried to sell my grandchildren as if they were merchandise. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a firm voice, stood up and began to speak. Your Honor, we are trying a particularly serious case related to money laundering, conspiracy to kidnap children, and participation in a transnational criminal organization. He presented the evidence one by one, each piece like another stab in my heart. The transfer receipt with a huge sum appeared on the large screen. The numbers in red made the whole room murmur. Then he showed a pile of fake passports. Strange names that recalled the criminal network Chloe and Cortez were involved in. 3 plane tickets to Madrid, only in the names of Chloe, Sophia, and Leo, were projected, making me squeeze my grandchildren's hands tightly so they wouldn't notice my trembling. But what made the room erupt was when the photo of Sophia and Leo appeared, with 2 crooked red circles marking their faces. Some women in the back rows exclaimed, "How horrible!" The murmur grew like a wave filled with indignation and horror. I immediately pulled Sophia and Leo close, covering their eyes. "Grandma, what is that?" Sophia whispered in an innocent voice. I stroked her head and replied with a broken voice, "Nothing, sweetie. It's just an old photo." But inside I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry until I was empty. How could I explain to them that their own mother had marked them as targets for a criminal enterprise? The prosecutor continued, his voice growing sharper as he presented the recording of the phone call that changed everything. Chloe's voice filled the room, desperate but icy. "Cortez, the children are gone. Without them, what are we going to negotiate with?" Cortez's voice responded curtly, "First, go to the hotel. The intermediary is waiting." The entire room fell silent. Only Chloe's ragged breathing could be heard over the speaker. I heard every word as if it were being branded into my mind. Every phrase of hers was a knife, shattering the memories of the days when I believed she was family. Chloe's defense attorney stood up, trying to save her. "Your Honor, my client is a victim manipulated by Julian Cortez. She was unaware of the trafficking network and had no intention of harming her children." But the prosecutor immediately retorted, his voice as sharp as a razor. "In the recording, the defendant herself says she needed the children to negotiate. That is the act of an accomplice, not a victim." He pointed to the screen where the tape replayed, and Chloe's words echoed like an undeniable confession. Cortez remained silent, head bowed like someone accepting his fate. When the judge's gavel struck, the entire room froze for a moment. The defendants, Chloe Lopez and Julian Cortez, are sentenced to lengthy prison terms for money laundering, conspiracy to kidnap children, and participation in a transnational criminal organization, the judge declared, his voice deep and firm. The room erupted in comments. Some shook their heads in disgust. Others whispered in horror. I sat there, squeezing Victoria's hand, breathing a sigh of relief, but with a bitter knot in my throat. Justice had been served, but it couldn't erase the pain in my heart. Sophia tugged at my blouse, her voice very quiet. "Grandma, where's Mommy?" The girl's question pierced me like a knife. I hugged her tightly, unable to answer. How could I tell her that her mother, whom she loved, was being led away in handcuffs behind bars? Leo, sitting beside her, looked up with wide eyes. "Did Mommy go on a work trip, Grandma?" I just nodded, silent tears falling. "Yes, she's very busy. But Grandma and your dad will always be here with you, okay?" They both nodded, but I knew this truth would remain as an eternal scar on their hearts. When we left the courthouse, the scorching midday sun beat down on the square. People were dispersing, their laughter and conversations mixing with the noise of traffic. But for me, everything seemed to fade away. Victoria took my hand and said softly, "Eleanor, you saved the children. You are their hero." I smiled weakly. But inside, I didn't feel like a hero. I was just a grandmother, a mother trying to protect what little was left of my family. The truth, however cruel, had finally come to light. Several months have passed since the trial, and my 2 grandchildren's lives and mine have slowly found a new rhythm in Charleston. I rented a small apartment near the central square where every morning the church bells ring as clear as a peaceful melody, pulling me out of nightmares about Chloe and Cortez. The apartment isn't large, just a small living room, a kitchen nook, and 2 narrow bedrooms. But for me, it's a sanctuary, a new home for Sophia and Leo. Every morning, I wake up early and make breakfast, an egg sandwich for Leo, cookies and milk for Sophia. I comb Sophia's hair, straighten the collar of Leo's uniform, and walk them to the elementary school near St. Francis Church. Seeing them run into the classroom, waving at me with a radiant smile, I feel a spark of hope sneak into my heart, even though the pain still burns like an open wound. One afternoon, while watering some chrysanthemum pots on the balcony, a yellow taxi stopped in front of the building. The door opened and Ben got out, a travel bag over his shoulder, his shirt wrinkled from the long journey from Denver. My son was visibly thinner, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken as if they carried a story too heavy to bear. I dropped the watering can. Water splashed on the floor, and I ran to hug him. "Ben, you're back!" I exclaimed, my voice choked, holding him tightly as if I feared he would vanish, just like those peaceful days that were gone. Ben hugged me back, then knelt and opened his arms as Sophia and Leo ran from inside the house, shouting excitedly, "Daddy! Daddy!" They threw themselves into his arms with laughter. And in that moment, I saw Ben's eyes light up, if only for a second. That night, the four of us sat around the small table in the kitchen. I made the chili that Ben had loved since he was a child, the aroma of corn and spices filling the house with warmth. Sophia told stories from school, and Leo showed off a drawing his teacher had praised. But the atmosphere was still heavy, as if we all knew there was an unspoken topic, something that had to be said. After clearing the dishes, I sent the children to their room to play with puzzles and sat down across from Ben. "Son, I have to tell you everything," I said in a grave voice, clasping my hands to stop them from shaking. I began to speak slowly, from that afternoon at Arthur's dry cleaners, when I received the coat and discovered the plastic bag with the transfer receipt and the photo of Sophia and Leo marked with a red circle. I told him about the overnight bus ride, about the safe under the dresser, about the plane tickets to Madrid without his name on them, and about the trial where the atrocious truth about Chloe and Cortez was revealed. Every word was like a stab, not just for me, but for Ben's heart as well. He remained silent, running his fingers through his messy hair, his eyes red. And when I told him the part where Chloe called the children merchandise to negotiate with, Ben slammed his hand on the table, and his voice broke and said, "Enough, Mom." He stood up and began pacing in the small room as if he couldn't bear the weight of the truth. "Mom, the truth is I've suspected Chloe for a while now," Ben said, his voice full of anguish. She used to leave early and come back late. She would hide her phone, and suddenly large sums of money would disappear from the house. I would ask her, but she always said it was for work. I didn't want to believe she could do something wrong. I thought I was protecting the family, but it turns out I was just a fool. He stopped, turned his face away, his shoulders shaking. I stood up, took my son's trembling hand, saying nothing, just silently sharing his pain. I knew Ben's suffering wasn't just from his wife's betrayal, but also from the feeling of helplessness at not being able to protect his two children. Sophia and Leo came out of their room silently, as if sensing the tension in the air. Sophia was hugging her yarn doll and asked quietly, "Grandma, is Daddy sad?" I nodded, pulling her closer and putting another piece of meat in her bowl. "Daddy is just tired from the trip. Eat up." Leo joined the conversation with an innocent voice. "Daddy, can we play with Legos tomorrow?" Ben smiled weakly and stroked his head. "Yes, we'll play tomorrow." But I knew that smile was nothing more than a mask to hide his broken heart. After dinner, when the children were in their room, Ben sat next to me and said firmly, "Mom, I'm filing for divorce. I'm going to get full custody of the children, and with you, I'm going to build a new life for them." I looked at him and saw in his eyes a determination I hadn't seen in a long time. "Are you sure, Ben?" I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded, squeezing my hand. "I can't forgive her, Mom. It's not for me. It's for Sophia and Leo. They deserve a safe life, and I will do everything to make them happy." I nodded, tears in my eyes. At last, my son had found the courage to face the truth, even though it hurt so much. That night, I stood on the balcony looking at the dimly lit street. The yellow light from the lampposts cast flickering shadows. From inside the house, Ben's voice reading stories to the children mixed with the pure laughter of Sophia and Leo. And then the teddy bear said, "I'm not afraid of the dark anymore." Ben read. And I heard Leo exclaim, "What a brave teddy bear." The sound of pages turning added to the atmosphere, bringing a fragile but priceless peace. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and felt a little warmth return to my heart. Time passed quietly. The small apartment I had rented truly became a home, where little by little, the wounds of 3 generations began to heal. The court had already made its final ruling, granting full custody of Sophia and Leo to Ben and me. Hearing the news, I sat on the sofa, clutching a hot cup of tea, feeling as if the heavy weight that had been crushing my chest was finally lifted. Every Sunday morning, I took Sophia and Leo to the nearby park. The bells of St. Francis Church rang, mingling with the singing of birds in the trees. Ben, who now had a stable job in Charleston, would play football with Leo on the green grass. The boy, with his short little legs, would run after the ball, smiling from ear to ear. "Dad, kick it hard!" Meanwhile, Sophia would happily ride her tricycle around the fountain, her high ponytail waving in the wind. I sat on a bench, savoring a hot cup of coffee, watching the three of them play under the sun. The light filtered through the leaves, scattering golden flecks on the ground, and in that moment, I felt a peace I had never felt before, as if the storm had passed and the sky was finally clear again. One afternoon, the whole family went to the market in the central square. The air was filled with the aroma of grilled hot dogs and fresh fruit. Sophia, her eyes shining, chose an old comic book for herself at a bookstall, eagerly flipping through each page. "Grandma, this one has a princess who rides a dragon," she exclaimed, showing me the book. I smiled and stroked her head. "You chose well. I'll read it to you tonight." Leo, on the other hand, insisted on a superhero-shaped balloon, pulling on Ben's shirt. "Dad, buy it for me. Superheroes fly really high." Ben laughed, pulled out his wallet, and paid while I quietly chose the freshest bunches of vegetables, some bright red tomatoes, and a bag of corn to make chili. These simple moments, like small pieces of a puzzle, were slowly putting the family that seemed to have been broken back together. In the apartment, I taped Sophia's and Leo's clumsy drawings to the living room wall. There was one with 4 people: me, Ben, Sophia, and Leo, holding hands under a red roof with a big sun and a few white clouds. Sophia pointed to the drawing, proud. "This is our house, Grandma. I chose the red roof because it's my favorite color." I looked at the picture with a soft smile, but I felt a lump in my throat. Their mother wasn't in the drawing, and I knew that no matter how hard I tried, that emptiness would always be there. I just hoped that Ben's love and mine would be enough to fill a little of that void in the children's hearts. Sometimes I would see Chloe's picture in the newspapers, usually in short articles about the case, accompanied by a photo where she looked gaunt and lifeless behind bars. Every time it happened, I would hide the paper, burying it at the bottom of the trash can, not wanting Sophia or Leo to see it. They were too young to understand, and I didn't want their pure smiles to be stained by a cruel truth about their mother. But I knew that one day I would have to tell them. I would have to explain why she was no longer there. That thought made me shudder. But I repeated to myself that when the time came, I would find a way for them to understand without that pain destroying them. At night, when Sophia and Leo were fast asleep, I would sit at the kitchen table and open the old journal I had started writing in my first days in Charleston. My hand, now less shaky, would glide over the pages, leaving these words. "Today, Sophia drew a family. She doesn't know that this red roof is all we have. But I will do whatever it takes to make sure it always stands strong. They will grow up surrounded by love and truth, not lies or fear. And never again will anyone dare to use a red pen to mark their faces." I closed the notebook. I turned off the light, leaving only the sound of my 2 little angels quiet breathing in the next room and the soft murmur of the night wind coming through the window. Sometimes in my dreams, I still see Chloe's image. Not the one from the courtroom, but the one of that young woman who one day timidly entered my house with a bouquet of daisies in her hand and a nervous smile. I wake up and the tears fall silently, not out of nostalgia, but from the pain of a betrayed trust. But then I hear Sophia calling me cheerfully from the living room, or Leo's mischievous laughter as he plays with his dad. And I know I can't let the past drag me back down. I wipe my tears. I get up and prepare a new day for my little family. One night, after reading a story to my 2 grandchildren, Ben stayed with me in the living room. "Mom, I found a steady job here," he said, his voice deep but firm. "I want to stay in Charleston. Raise the kids with you. We'll make it, right?" I looked at my son and saw in his eyes a determination I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Of course we will, son," I replied, taking his hand. "We'll make it because we have each other," Ben smiled. And for the first time in many months, that smile was no longer heavy with burdens. In the darkness, as the streetlight filtered through the slits in the curtains, I understood that my family, after the storm, had truly been reborn. It was a painful rebirth, built on the broken pieces of trust and love, but it was full of hope. I got up, went out onto the balcony, and looked at the quiet street. The church bells rang in the distance like a reminder that no matter how cruel the past had been, we, me, Ben, Sophia, and Leo would keep moving forward. With love as a beacon lighting the way, in the depths of my heart, I understood that everything that happened wasn't just my family's tragedy, but also a warning to everyone. Sometimes the person who hurts you is precisely the person you trusted the most. Naivety, blind faith can become the open door for darkness to enter. But I also understood that the love and courage of a mother, of a grandmother, always have the strength to protect and guide. I want to tell everyone something. Learn to look closely at the strange signs. Don't close your eyes for fear of facing the truth. A family is only truly preserved when we have the courage to defend it with all our hearts and with firmness, even in the face of the most painful betrayal. This story, it's a part of me now, a scar I carry. I really wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent or run like I did? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I truly want to know.